Hello and welcome to this extra special interview from Five Leaves Bookshop and Nottingham Unesco City of Literature. Today, Sandeep Mahal, director of our City of Literature, will be talking to Colin McElwee, who was born and bred in Nottingham and co-founded and is a senior director of the brilliant Worldreader organisation. Worldreader has brought the pleasure and advantages of reading to over 17 million readers in 62 countries since 2010, which is absolutely amazing. You can find out more about their work online at worldreader.org, or you could just continue watching this interview. So now I'll hand over to Sandy and Colin to hear more about Worldreader and their work.
Thank you so much, Pippa, and for the opportunity to have this conversation with Colin, which I've been meaning to have pre-pandemic. We were saying earlier, weren't we, Colin, that we've been meaning to do this. And now we've just got so much more to talk about.
Yeah, you bet, absolutely. And I'm really honoured to be here. Since actually wandering through the market square on one of my annual pilgrimages to Nottingham and seeing that big banner that you had outside the council house. Yeah, I thought, yeah, I've got to talk to you guys.
Yes, absolutely. And when you're back this year or maybe next year, we're definitely going to take you to Five Leaves Bookshop as well, which I believe will be reopening on the 12th of April. And really can't wait to go back and start browsing books and start buying books. Yeah, we're really going to need it. And I think a lot of us have turned to books as a distraction and solace during these really challenging times. So maybe I should just talk a little bit about, start with where you are, where you're zooming in from, and maybe give us a sense of your surroundings. What's around you, Colin?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. Well, actually, I left the UK about 27, 28 years ago to do a master's, an MBA in Barcelona. And then I got a job in the beer business, which is very close to my heart for all sorts of reasons, back in the UK, in Edinburgh. And Edinburgh's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
But after living for 2 years in Barcelona with the light, whatever, it's actually quite a dark city. And that kind of really hit me. I said, I just have to get back to Barcelona. So I came back 21 years ago. And so I have to say, it is one thing during the pandemic. Light is something that's really, really important. And to have a small balcony that you can go out and read and just enjoy things. The days when we were really locked down, when you couldn't really even leave your house except for special reasons. I know I'm really, really privileged, but it's one of those things that has helped me get through the last year in a way that I don't feel as though I've suffered, I'll be honest with you. And done a lot of reading, like yourselves, no doubt. And so my surroundings are that. But it's also, for me, living outside of the UK is always, I'm always slightly out of my comfort zone, which for me is a good thing. And I'm always learning. I'm not 100% sure. I speak Spanish, I speak some Catalan. But it's actually quite good to be on the edge a little bit. It just keeps you awake and your antennae primed. So, but I consider all of that a real privilege. But like you said, born and bred in Nottingham. So
yeah, so I'm really intrigued by that actually. So I just want to give people a sense of your success, because and the type of success and experiences you've had. How does a boy from West Bridgford bring digital reading to developing nations and help over 17 million people to read? Can you give us a little bit of context and background to growing up in Nottingham and kind of what led you to that journey?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. And I have thought about it. It's kind of, and there are reasons, and you really have to look into your side of yourself to find out when you get that. And of course, I grew up in West Bridgford, and then I moved to Bramcote, and I was at the Beckett School over on Ruddington Lane and Wilford Lane. And, I had a great experience growing up. But around the time, it's around 1984, it sounds kind of corny, but Live Aid, it was Band-Aid and then Live Aid came out. And I remember being on the streets of Nottingham with some friends of mine, trying to put 3 or 4 chords together, looking to get money in. But the whole thing about Band-Aid and Live Aid, a lot of people underestimate it, but it sensitized a generation to another part of the world that, it's kind of like the have-nots and just how much people didn't have. And so part of that is just like thinking about the world out there, even though you're in Nottingham. I studied at Manchester and lived in London, but it's just knowing what's going on in the rest of the world. I would say also, I came from an Irish family. My mother and father were from Derry and from Dublin and Derry, respectively. And being immigrants, it's very interesting, actually. And I've never ever thought about this previously, but they kind of had to look to find work and whatever. And a lot of my friends, as a result, were kind of like kids of immigrants as well. But there is a kind of mindset, and I see it here in Spain. When you're an immigrant, you're definitely out of your comfort zone. And number one, and number two, there is a little bit more of a worldly consciousness about you. So yeah, the two things just put together. And my father was he was very well read, knew a lot about politics right across the world, whether it's from India to South America, Central America, Africa. And he would never talk about his own politics from Ireland, never. But he would talk about political situations, social situations around the world. So I can only figure out there was some joining up the dots there that sensitized me to the rest of the world growing up.
How interesting. And I can relate a lot to what you've said there. I'm the child of immigrant parents who came from the Punjab, India. Actually, my father arrived in Lincoln first in 1954, then to Nottingham, but he decided to settle in Derby. And so that's where I grew up, in the neighbouring city, as you know. Yeah. And don't really talk a lot about that when you're in Nottingham because of the rivalry. But it's
right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I'd certainly, for me growing up, there was a real sense of community, of giving, the contribution we could make to that community, and also of being grateful. I think, they obviously left India and were able to settle here, and create a better life for themselves. And there was this enormous sense of eternal gratitude for the opportunities we'd been given. I don't know if that was the same for you as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a kind of, I used to put it down to a Catholic guilt thing. That's kind of like a phrase, You have success, but you're not completely happy about it because you know what other people just don't have. But it is. There is an island, funnily enough, is one of the most generous. Right? You talk about generosity, like per capita in terms of giving. And I travel all around the world, and the Irish are like everywhere. But the immigrant communities are very. They work as a community, and they're sensitized, and they, as the diaspora, they're often sending funds back to the country. I mean, more than ever now that there's digital money, and it's kind of interesting. But nobody had actually asked me that question, Sandeep, until about 3 years ago. Like, why? There's a famous thing in communication, especially when you're trying to talk about a cause, that you have to tell people what you do. Why you do it, and kind of why it's urgent, so you do it right now. But then you have to tell people why you do it as a person. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I was with about 40 or 50 other people on a course, and they did similar things, and hardly any of us had thought about why we did it. So you had to really look inside. But that's a great question. I wouldn't have been able to answer it about 3 years ago.
So then how does that relate to Worldreader's vision and mission for people who haven't heard of your work before?
Well, I think one of the things that in my business life, I kind of came out was like, I studied economics. I got a job as an economist. I mean, I was a terrible economist, but I thought I've got to do it. I studied the thing. But I quickly got into sales and marketing in the food and then the drinks business. And one thing you learn in business very quickly is that you have to make partnerships, and you can't do things on your own, for example, which kind of like in business, that's a no-brainer. But often people in the not-for-profit or in foundations, or they have their projects with real passions, They start off and try to do it themselves, and they're kind of vertically integrated in between what they're thinking, what they do, and then trying to get to the recipient. But one thing that we've tried to do is partner with many organizations, whether they're big corporations like the Microsofts and the Amazons and the Pearsons and whatever, not-for-profits, other not-for-profits that actually know what's happening in the communities, and then with governments as well, and the multilateral, the kind of UNs and these multilateral agencies. That's how we get ourselves, our word out, if you like. And we're not an organization in a sense that like Save the Children or Medicos Sin Fronteras, or how's that, Doctors Without Borders, and that appeal to people in the streets, to give £1 or give £5. We're more of a B2B, if you like, type of organization. And so we kind of package our kind of what we do up in terms of getting communication out. Like, how do we get it win-wins? Because these B2B or B2G, if it's government, everybody wants something. And if you don't understand that you have to give them a win, it just becomes charity, and it's a very, very short-term engagement. So all I can say actually is that I couldn't have done this without working in business before. And I learned, I say to so many graduates that are just coming out of university, and they say, we'd love to work for you. I said, well, great, but why don't you go and get 3 or 4 years experience in a company, I don't know, selling shampoo or toothpaste, it doesn't really matter, but you're going to learn some disciplines that'll serve you well when it comes to actually really making an impact in the not-for-profit world.
That's really interesting. And I'm just reflecting on how the arts and cultural sector has become more commercially minded and entrepreneurial, probably over the last, 20, 30 years, as kind of Arts Council England and other funders encourage us to think about business models and having a mixed economy model. And partnerships, as you say, is absolutely key. And where you might co-commission projects in partnership and bid for major funding in partnership, particularly when you're working in a place. There's this term cultural placemaking, and increasingly we are working in partnership to make Nottingham an even more creative place. And I imagine then, in terms of this B2B communication, it's all about providing access, and routes to reading, paths to reading in places where there isn't much access to reading.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. And you said the word, kind of like, I'm not going to give you 50 slides of PowerPoint, you'll be glad to hear. Right? But we have a way of explaining it in sort of A, B, C, D, and the A and the B is access to books. Access is through everyone forgets these guys. There's like billions of these feature phones on the planet, billions of them. In India, for example, there's a company that didn't exist actually about 4 years ago called Jio. It's now the biggest operator in India, and we've just done a deal with them, and they get our library of books, which is a library of about 15,000 books, onto many of these types of phones right across, millions of these phones across India. So it's access, and then it's to books, and then really, when you look at books, and you'll know this as well as I do, but a book is a kind of a vehicle for either 2 pages or 2,000. It really doesn't matter. But when it comes to digital books, we've kind of done a lot of research on what actually works on small screens like this, as well as on smartphones or whatever. And like short, engaging, great content. And so we work with about 500 publishers across India, Africa, or South America, or wherever we're working. And we have, so it's actually a number of books, we're about 52, 53 languages. So it's also about local content. So if you're working in Delhi, we're working in Hindi. If we're working in Ghana, we're working Twi, or there's local African languages. So it's having great content in local languages at the time people need it. So there's kind of A and B, access to books. The C is kind of a continuous engagement. So if we're working in schools, we're training teachers on techniques to use simple books, the curriculum books, but getting people to use that, as well as getting them into the habit of using books. Because when you don't have access to any books as a teacher, it's actually quite hard to reintroduce books into your day-to-day teaching. And then, so that's A, B, C. And then the last one, and we're really lucky on this, is that it's data, because it's digital. So we get so much. We get about 1.2 million lines of data every day on what people are reading, where they're reading it, how long they're spending. I find this fascinating. Great books that people do not read because they can't engage with it. So after about 35 seconds of flicking through the first pages or reading, boom, they're out of there. But other books with great covers, great titles that are presented to people will go in. And if it's a kind of 3 to 5 minute first chapter experience that really engages, it's amazing what you can get, and you can build on that. And just before I came on here, because this is the beauty of data, is that I went on our dashboard, and we've done, since we started, the amount of time reading on our platforms is now 863 years, 9 months, 9 days, 7 hours. And which is kind of frighteningly like, yeah, it's great. But honestly, getting people to read, as we all know, even if it's in Nottingham, never mind about in Lagos or in Nairobi, it's difficult. It's difficult. So, but data gives you such a great insight into what works. And importantly, we talk to the World Bank or the UN or whoever, say what doesn't work when they're trying to get life-saving COVID information out. If you want to do it, there's ways to do that. And so there's all sorts of ways, even if it's just to read something that's going to save your life, right? It's just like a 2-minute read. There's kind of secrets that you could use to actually attract people so they will read it and comprehend it.
That's just so inspiring, Colin. And in a way, I'm thinking about kind of, in a sense, you're giving people in parts of the world where there's not much reading going on, you're kind of opening up their worlds through this portal through which they can imagine, they can read stories that really represent them and their voices and their communities, and kind of completely change their view on reading as well, because you're opening up access using, a device that everybody's got access to. And that just must be transformative, actually, and particularly in education, giving people a sort of world perspective, which is really amazing. You mentioned the publishers, so you're bringing digital reading to developing nations, whilst also helping small publishers in those countries, learning about the digital opportunities available to them. How did you go about building that community? I mean, was it really difficult to do from scratch? And kind of, what are the opportunities? And maybe you could give us an example of how you've supported a small publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've learned a ton since we started. I just realized how many people have great ideas and they go down and then they're out, after 6 months. And a lot of people thought that would happen to us. It's one of the big insights. I remember we started off with the Kindle. We said we're going to bring Kindles into schools. So we talked to Amazon. They gave us 30 or 40 Kindles free. And we talked to a publisher, Random House, as it happened, put a lot of children's books from the United States onto the Kindles. And then just before we set off to Ghana, and we had a friend who had a school down there. So we're doing our first ever pilot. It was the World Cup in South Africa. It was 2010. And Ghana were playing. And so I did it. I'm not particularly tech-minded, as this book, could attest to, because I kind of took the Wikipedia article off around the Ghana team, put it onto the Kindle, and it was all kind of skew with next to these beautiful books from Random House. We went to the school. You know which book everybody was reading? It was the book about the Ghana national football team. And then that was just insight number one: local content. We have to be working with local publishers. So it's kind of like a long way of saying, we didn't know that when we went down there. And we just started reaching out to publishers. And I remember the first publisher we went to Ghana. It was one of the they're all small, but it's kind of like one of the bigger educational ones. And those guys were great, because here's the thing. And I've been to big publishers across the world, in London and New York. They don't get it as fast as just about 99% of African publishers and Indian publishers. They go, okay, so I've got my catalogue of books, and I turn them into paper, and I try to sell them. And at the end of the season, I have a ton left in a warehouse, right? So you're saying to me, I just instead of taking that digital file and turning it into paper, I'll turn it into an EPUB, and you're going to distribute them. Great, let's talk. And we just signed up contracts, or left, right, and centre with them, because we said to them, we want your books free at the time. Now we pay for them, but we're going to make a model with the governments and with others, so that they will pay you for your digital books, but they won't pay you a paper price. Mind you, remember, like on the, let's say in sterling, on a £10 book, the publisher probably only gets back 10% of that, £1. What we said is actually, if we bring down the price of your book down to £1 total, you're going to get 70% of that back. But you can multiply that up at a massive scale right across the country. And by the way, you can sell all of your reading books to the diaspora in London, Nottingham, New York, San Francisco, where it is. Your market becomes like that. So publishers just signed up, because they said, well, is our existing asset, we can still turn it into paper, but the digital element is part of that asset. Let's get it out there, because we want to be read. And it sounds like how intelligent or whatever, but it really wasn't. We just learned by doing. Like, this is something that's really going to appeal to you. And our publishers have been amazingly supportive, because we give them the data back. We say, this is working, this isn't working so well. If you publish books of this genre or this type or this style, especially for digital consumption, you're going to get readership, you're going to get sales. So, we've done a lot. I think we've put about, I know it's over $2 million back into the publishing sector, mainly in Africa and in India over the last few years. So, because we're paying the publishers for that content now. And I'll just say lastly is that, we love publishers across the world, but the multinationals can go and swallow up a lot of these small organizations, publishers in Africa especially. India is a little bit more, quite a lot more ahead of the curve there. We want these small boutique publishers to live and to thrive, because it's so important they have a local reading ecosystem. It's so important that they're talking about local stories. And so it's kind of like, but I have to say, I'll be honest with you, we didn't know any of this on day one. We kind of went down with different theories, and we've just learned as we've gone.
That's terrific. And also, I think, reflects the success of Worldreader, that you have taken this approach of experimenting, of testing, of getting feedback, seeing what works, what doesn't, and iterating along the way. I can't pronounce the word, obviously. But I'm also really glad to hear how you're supporting and investing in that sort of small indie publishing ecology, because that is so important. And I'm reflecting on what this means in terms of diversity in publishing, something we've been talking a lot about in recent years, and more so in the last year, because of Black Lives Matter. We've been talking a lot about relevance and representation in publishing, and you're kind of doing it. You're already there. You're already doing it. You're having this conversation. You're looking at the data, and I'm just thinking about it from a writer's point of view. So a writer who is writing stories, kind of based in, say, Africa and other parts of the world, relevant to those parts of the world that they can relate to. How do they let you know about their stories? How do they get their stories on the Worldreader app?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the classic kind of book that's not a curriculum book, because that's where the market is for most publishers in Africa, frankly. Reading for leisure is there, but it's a very small market. It's growing. So people that normally got published would be the university professor that puts $20,000 on the table and says, publish my book. he'll have his family and his extended family reading it, but it doesn't really create a love of reading, right? So what we've done, and again, this is something almost by accident. So actually, because we have so much data, Unesco came to us and published this using our data. It's called Reading in the Mobile Era. I'll send you a link you can maybe put out with this so people can read it. And they used our data and they published this in 2014. And one of the big conclusions was that if you've got 50 boys and 50 girls in a room, and you often do in a classroom in sub-Saharan Africa, girls are going to read more than boys, and that's probably not a surprise to you, and we're going to know, but they will read 4, 5, 6 times more than boys, and that was a surprise to everybody. When you give access, reading is really something that girls are really hungry for. So we took that piece of data and we said, well, why don't we create content not for girls only, but that empowers girls, their stories that are local, written by local authors. So I'm coming to your question right now. But they have stories that appeal to boys and girls, but they empower girls as well in terms of what happens in the story. But they have to be real and they have to be authentic. So the way we did it was this is old-fashioned marketing. We did a competition nationwide in Nigeria, in Ghana, and in Kenya. And we had some money, actually. This is supported by the Gates Foundation. So they were real, they're great. They don't actually fund that much in education globally. They do that in the US, but things around libraries and content at that time, they were. So we did the competition. We said, write a synopsis of like 1 page, X number of words about the story. We got a bunch of local publishers in each country. They went through and said, okay, these 40 or 50 synopses look really, really interesting. They whittled it down to, I think, 30. And then we invited the young writers. They had to be first-time writers, by the way. This is one of the things. Or they hadn't been published. So they'd probably been writing a lot, but they hadn't been published. And each publisher helped, I think it was like 10 in one country, 10, to produce 30 books. And there were 30 great books that were published with the name of the author. We got them out to 70 people. But it was a big sort of, what you would say is a demonstration of how the barriers to entry to write, you don't have to be that university professor with $20,000. You have an idea, and you have a level of literacy, but you want to be trained into how to write a story, a fairly short story. This is the kind of like thing, has to have short chapters, work for mobile. And that was a way for us to like tick so many boxes, get new blood into writing. By the way, we had thousands of entries. So everybody was kind of going, oh God, but I can actually write a book digitally. I don't need to do it through Worldreader, right? It's like, you get great content, and then you're getting boys and girls reading around stories that empowered girls. Which, by the way, I always quoted Christopher Hitchens, who was a writer and a journalist who died 7 or 8 years ago. He used to always say, it's like the answer to poverty globally is easy: empower women. That's all you have to do. And so this is a little part of empowering women, and if you like, normalizing amongst boys women's roles in society. And we've done a lot more of that ever since. But it all came from a little bit of data. We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't got the data through that Unesco report.
I love that. I mean, that is just so deeply inspiring, the way you're building aspiration, confidence and skills to empower women is and normalizing their role in cultures that perhaps, have a particular view of a women's role is terrific. And so supporting publishers, you're nurturing a generation of writing talent coming through, which, you know, I kind of relate to because it's a big part of Nottingham City of Literature's role, is very much about supporting and nurturing young writers and shining a spotlight on their stories to a global audience. What about reader development? So you've got these readers, and now we've got to find the audiences, you know, for the content, for the books that appear. And over the last few years in Nottingham, we've been having a real focus on reading for pleasure. So we've been staging events and campaigns like the Big City Reads, where young people have chosen the 4 books they want everybody in Nottingham to read, and it's featured on trams, on buses, in public places. How do you really animate reading through an app and encourage more people to read for pleasure?
Yeah, that's a really good, and that's the question, right? So I always say in business, it's the same. You can have a great product or service, but if you haven't got distribution, forget about it. And if you haven't got consumption at the end of it, you're lost. So we think we've got a pretty good product, service, library, call it what you like. Distribution would be really lucky. So we work through all the major, you know, the Vodafones, et al., and the Reliance Jio, like in India, great companies to get it out there. But yeah, now we have to get people to consume them. I put them in business language of, you know, to read, but well, we want consumption. So how do we do it? Honestly, it's old-fashioned marketing. So, well, it's a little bit of digital. So there's a little bit of, you know, notifications, prize winners, league tables for the top readers. You know, you get a gold medal here, recognition. Are you reading at target every day? Are you reading 15 minutes every day? And your app will tell you that. So we do that kind of like, we use that digital side of things. But we've also done things, for example, in Cameroon, the local Orange, it was Orange, put big banners and posters around the town, like reading, books are free, go and read, reading changed your life. Well, I remember this one thing, and you'll know this, it's kind of like reading is kind of synonymous with education in Africa. People say it. Now, professional educationalists will say, well, it's not, education is a whole different thing. Well, people understand that in the street, well, reading is education, and education is life or death. There is no future without education. And illiterate parents know that for their kids. So if you can give an avenue to get to reading and to books, you're pushing at a much more open door than you would be here, for example, you know, or in Nottingham. So it's very interesting. But one of the things we did, I don't know how you say this in India, but all around the global south, there's kind of like mini buses going around where people go to work and come back, and you can get about 15 or 20 people crammed in there. And people would always be on their phones. And so we did a big promotion, actually with poets. And poetry is a big piece of consumption because you know it's going to be a short piece and it's rich in words and you can do it at different levels. But we actually did it with poets and poetry. Whole team went around Accra, which is the capital of Ghana, and onto these buses and gave leaflets out, right? So like, so download this app, read this poem, you know, and share it on the bus. So you're getting people that are crammed together for an hour and a half, going to a job at 5 a.m, coming back at 8 p.m. And it's a really good reading moment. I mean, it's just that's classic, you know, 101 marketing. It's just understanding the moment, but actually getting to people and seducing them. And there's a lot of seduction you've got to do to get people to read that first book or two. Because a lot of people gave up on reading years ago, or they associate it with something that's really boring and not really engaging. They want something that's like WhatsApp or Facebook. I got a message, you get your 2-minute fix. But if you can give somebody a 2-minute fix in a book and it's the first chapter, or it's a poem, or it's the lyrics to a song, then you're starting to get to people at their level and what they're looking for.
Yeah. For me, seduction is the physical object of a book. But for me, it's also enormously accessible to be able to get physical objects that are hugely seductive. And so I really appreciate actually the importance of smartphone technology, mobile phone, and what it offers in terms of access to literature, to poetry, and just how powerful that can be in that moment on a commute or in another moment. I want to talk a little bit about UNESCO and its global goals, or the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Nottingham is a UNESCO City of Literature designated in December 2015. And that UNESCO designation, I suppose, represents two things. It's one, a Lifetime Achievement Award for the remarkable contribution that Nottingham has made to literature. And secondly, it places an obligation on the city to invest in and commit to culture and creativity as a driver for sustainable development and to contribute to the global goals. So how do you see the relationship between Worldreader and UNESCO, and how do your work contribute to those global goals?
Yeah, I mean, from the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, we kind of concentrate on 4 and 5, which is education, and then gender equality for the reasons I mentioned. And then I think also, I should know this, 13 or 17, which is about youth as well.
Yeah, and maybe reduced inequalities, because I'm a firm believer that reading and writing are probably, the 2 most powerful tools we have to get young people out of poverty.
Yeah, so well said, so well said. So I remember we contacted UNESCO. I think we were about 3 weeks old. We tried to.
I love the ambition there. I love that. 3 weeks old. Let's tap up UNESCO.
Yeah. Well, it's funny actually. Maybe I'll tell you later about how lucky we were in the early days by elbowing ourselves, in the door. But we soon became. It's kind of like. This is only 10 or 11 years ago, but really, people really didn't understand or grasp the digital advantages. But UNESCO gave us a voice and invited us every year to Paris, and we talked on International Literacy Day in September, and we built up a great relationship with those guys, and there's incredible knowledge going through the veins of UNESCO for years and years and years. I used to always say to them, I said, well, if you're going to produce a report and, amazingly you want it to be read, you wouldn't produce one of these things, right? If you give it to us and you give us, a 5-minute reading version, and then there's an annex, we can get it to millions and millions of people that need to read it, by the way, that should be reading your stuff. So it was kind of that, we were a bit provocative, with the actually to say, but you do write these not to sit on the shelf. You do write them to be consumed. And it's really that sort of message that we've taken to big organizations that frankly have been incredibly visionary for the last 50, 60 years, incredibly, and they still continue to be, but to give them avenues and confidence, frankly, that digital has a big space there. Because remember one thing, I found this out. Now I came from business, right? So innovation is something it's a meat and drink, right? This is like, it's in your DNA. Education is frightened of innovation. And when reading, there's a big sort of like, you remember the backlash towards digital books. And it's not the same. No, it's not the same, but it doesn't have to be, right? And what we found is that by working with UNESCO and their confidence in digital is a really powerful message when we go to other forums to say, this isn't the panacea, but it's a part of the mix. And you've got to find a way. Because I often I say this quite provocatively as well at education conferences. Everybody here admits that 3 billion people on the planet are illiterate or lowly literate. So they're not functioning in terms of readers. So that's a scale problem. That's not a quality problem. That's a scale problem. But I can assure you, if this is an education conference, 99% of you will only want to talk about the quality of education and feel fear when you kind of lower the quality to get to many, many more people. In business, you don't put the top quality product out there. You put a product out there at different levels and you position it depending on your market aspirations. And but UNESCO got that very early and have helped us enormously in terms of, so having a UNESCO badge and other badges from governments or whatever has helped us get the voice into other forums, so people at least begin to consider the power of digital. And they also say, a lot of people say, well, I don't like digital. I don't like reading a book on a phone. Well, surprise, surprise, you're not the target type of thing. And again, that's marketing 101. If you're in Procter & Gamble and you're trying to sell toothpaste, it doesn't matter what the chief executive thinks about that toothpaste. It matters what your target does. And that's also something that people have pushed back. But again, the UN, UNESCO, UNICEF, others, these are big, big organizations with great clout and deserved, if you like, credibility. So they've been really good with us.
It's really interesting. I'm just finding this conversation really fascinating, actually, because we talk about, I guess you're so driven by consumer insight, what your consumers want and what they tell you they want. That informs your sort of editorial commissioning, content commissioning process. So that informs what it is you will invest in. And it just makes me reflect on, I suppose, artistic excellence and the amazing editors and artistic directors, everybody who works in the arts. We kind of trust their judgment to know what's good and to actually surprise us sometimes, well, a lot of the time, and to surprise, to challenge, to provoke us through the artistic decisions that they make. So this is I don't know, a bit of a really interesting tension, I guess, between a policy which is entirely driven by what consumers want, because that's, it's going to get read, it's going to sell, between those that they don't quite know it exists yet. So it's kind of nice to be surprised by that.
Yeah. Let me give you an example on that, because I always think you've got to get people through the door of the library. Let's put it in library terms. I spent many hours, by the way, at West Bridgford Library. That's why I kind of grew up in there.
It's a very beautiful library. I love spending time there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father took me down there twice a week because they were both voracious readers. But then when I went in, there was a kids section, but I could explore all sorts of other books, right? Whether they were books about photography, they're very visual, or there were books that were, more adult in nature, whatever. But it was, you had to get me in there. You had to actually bring me in there. And I was talking to the guys from Washington, the Library of Congress, and he was a guy from America. Now, it's one of the most beautiful libraries in the world. It was big pillars, and these big, big white buildings. But I said to him, we had lunch here, and he came to see us. And I said, but the people that need to see those books are in the South Bronx in New York, right? So if we took your library and put it out of Washington and into the South Bronx, you know what? You still wouldn't get success because people are intimidated to come in. They would go, that's not for me. But the whole thing is this: how do you get people to come in? And if they're reading, I don't know, a book about Nottingham Forest or football or Notts County and football or whatever it is, they're going to see, incidentally, those beautiful, incredible books one day because you've given them access. But we're very good in I would say within the publishing industry at ignoring that and sort of like putting the barriers to entry increasingly high. So I always look to mavericks and people that are in publishing to say, listen, we're going to try this and we'll try that. I think it's incredibly wonderful industry, but it's the innovation is going to come from sort of outside in rather than from within. And but there's so much more that could be done. The penetration of publishers in the UK. How much market they're not getting to, and in most markets that is an opportunity. And it's about finding how do you get there. So I know that the City of Literature, Nottingham's been doing a lot with local publishers, that work with local communities. That really is the way to go because they're going to understand what that readership are looking for.
Absolutely, yes. A lot of people watching will be indie authors, lots of readers, a lot of people, partners we collaborate with. And so I just want to, maybe you could give them a sense of how might they get involved with Worldreader? Where do they find out more? And, what are the opportunities to potentially collaborate locally in Nottingham with Worldreader? Do you see any opportunities there?
Yeah, I mean, really, it is really, there's 2 or 3 different dimensions that we work at. Number one is just visibility, to say, listen, this is happening in the rest of the world. What can we learn, if you like, from the African or the Indian experience and bring it back here? It's not a one-way thing here. So I think there's learnings that could come back to people that are involved in the City of Literature, but also the publishers and all of the stakeholders. And I think looking at that, we'd love, to get visibility for what we're doing. And here's the thing: people actually say to me, "Oh, what can I do?" And I say, "Oh, you can donate some money, or let me understand what you do, whatever." Once you start to read what we're doing, and then hopefully the website communicates reasonably well what we do, you're going to know better as a person what you could do. Now, it could be an idea. It could be your father's got a corporate that are trying to do something innovative in education, digital, put us in contact, because we're looking for stakeholders right across the UK. And one of the reasons here is, and it's about the UK is, it's a product. It was a driver of colonialism. One of them, like the French and the Portuguese and the Spanish, right? So there is a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge in the UK about Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and about India, Pakistan, and other parts of the world as a direct result of that. Now, those communities will also be really smart about content that's needed, the types of organizations we or others should be working with in those communities in the global south. And we're really, really open to having, just write to me. I'll put my email in the details below, but reach out, because I've got a great team. And if I don't know, I can divert you to 1 or 2 other people. But I never get tired of talking to people about how we can make this better, because surprise, surprise, I don't know everything, right? It's kind of like I've only got this far by learning from others. And when it comes to the insights in local communities, we need that. We have great people on the ground. We have teams in Ghana, in Kenya, and in India, and in South America, and Middle East. But there's a lot of rich knowledge amongst first generation, second generation diaspora in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, that's really terrific, and I'm sure a lot of people will be following up and checking out the Worldreader website. I mean, what comes to my mind is the international network of UNESCO Cities of Literature. There's 39 of us in the world, and we're not a particularly diverse network. And so we are working very hard to cultivate more applications from cities across the global south. And this is perhaps where you might be able to help, because you have terrific insight to what would make a brilliant city of literature in parts of the global south. So perhaps we could have a conversation about that, and you could connect us with people, and we can talk a bit more about what the UNESCO designation means and what it can do for a city. And I'm sure cities must come immediately to your mind as to who could make brilliant cities of literature.
Oh gosh, absolutely. And not just even the cities, it's like the people that are passionate about this within those cities. And that's one of the great things about books, and you'll know this better than I do, but people really are passionate about reading. The ones that have found it. So you go around, there's a kind of like secret sort of network, and people are under the radar right across the world that want the tools and want the passion. So if they want the UNESCO brand to come in, but the expertise to come in to actually give visibility to the beauty of reading. And, I'd be really happy to brainstorm with you, after this, about different contacts that we can do. And, we work in India, but you'll know better than I do that it's kind of what a big country, right? 1.2 billion people. I mean, talk about regional. So, we're in Delhi mainly. We're a little bit in the north, in in the Himalayas as well. But boy, you know, it's a long way to go. Africa's 54 countries. And, you know, we're in quite a lot of those countries. But reading the UNESCO and this whole city of culture drive, yeah, we can brainstorm about that. And yeah, we've got a great network of people that are already passionate about reading.
Thank you. I really look forward to that brainstorm. I've just got one more question because I know Pippa's going to be joining us again very soon. Really, it's about what's next for Worldreader. Where do you think it might go? What are your future ambitions?
Yeah, well, you know, a little thing called COVID came along, you know, 12 months ago, closed 80% of schools in the world, at least temporarily, and that'll happen again on and off. So actually digital reading at home, and understanding how you could read outside of a school setting became really incredibly relevant. I remember Unesco, one of the first on the phone to us saying, we're trying to put together a consortium of organizations that know about this. And so we've been had a really, really busy year. Yeah, funding pretty flat, but enormous interest in what we do. We decided during this year as well to take our learnings to the global north and to launch in the United States. And we're doing that at this moment. Depending on how that goes, because it's kind of a different challenge, we're going to launch in the UK. So that's going to be 2022. And we're going to take those learnings and we'd love to perhaps pilot in Nottingham, which we mentioned.
You must. We won't let you do that. We won't let you enter the UK without piloting in Nottingham first.
This is effectively a verbal contract. I can feel it.
Yes, I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah. So that's what really is really to make this really Worldreader it's a global effort. So, you know, I'm 11 years into this. I normally get the 7-year itch, you know, to move on and do something else. Yeah. Well, no, I'm going to be, you know, funding still coming in or whatever. I'll be doing this till I retire and long beyond. So, because it's such a it's such a passion, incredibly great people, and I have a great team. But we're learning all the time. It kind of like keeps me relatively young, at least here, in terms of what we're learning and the possibilities that are out there. So, yeah, I would say more of the same is going to be our mantra, really.
Oh, it's just been wonderful having this conversation with you, Colin, and I wish you all the very best. And I believe you are truly building a better world with words. That's our mission in Nottingham as a UNESCO City of Literature. You're really making a difference in places where they need help the most. So this has been truly wonderful for me to have this conversation with you and really look forward to following up on everything we've discussed. So thank you. No, and welcome back, Pippa.
Hi, thank you so much, Colin. It's absolutely fascinating, and it's a good job I was off video, because I would have dived in with loads more questions if I hadn't been muted. I just wanted to ask, really. I mean, Five Leaves, you might know, is both an independent bookshop and an independent publisher. We've been a publisher for much longer than we've been a bookshop. And we're really strong believers in the value of reading for everyone, no matter who or where they are. I was just kind of wondering if you had any ideas of how we and other UK independent booksellers and publishers and our customers might be able to do something to help Worldreader take your mission forwards, because, you know, we'd really love to be able to contribute.
Oh, that's really kind of you, Pippa. Yeah, I think incredible, because you're obviously attracting people that love reading, right? So they're coming in after COVID, they'll be coming back in through your doors. So really, if there's possibilities to get visibility for what we're doing, number one. Number two, I'm always interested in the diaspora as well, and the second generation, third generation, because there are books that we have on our platform that many people, if they're first generation, you know, read as a child, but have kind of gone out of the family. But it's kind of if there's recommendations that people say, but that book is available. You can read that book that you read as a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old in Ghana or in Delhi or wherever it is. And it's those kind of like stories. And I think, you know, I'd be really happy to, when I'm in Nottingham, so close to my heart, is to give a little talk actually with readers and with customers and the lovers of books in Nottingham. I'd really enjoy doing that, and so I think it's just that keeping that channel open, and as so many good things come from a conversation, so people know about us, what we're doing, and I'll say it's tough because it really is tough. I mean, when I was in business, it was so easy. I used to just sell something, I'd get some income, and I'll be able to invest it anywhere, and you grow. It really is tough, but all of our luck and all of our advances have come out of conversations like this. And so opening up those conversations will be so valuable.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we can certainly help. I'm sure Sandy can help hugely with that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, we're part of various book selling networks and publishing networks. So, you know, anything we can do to help, just let us know.
No, I think
we'll think about it as well.
Yeah. I just add one thing actually. Books are really, if they're publishers or they're first-time authors, I want to just like say, I'll donate my book to you, and they can sell in the UK, and it'll only be available in sub-Saharan Africa or India or whatever. That's the beauty of digital. That's one thing to go. And also books, they call it technically about social and emotional learning, SEL. Books, often for kids that have had incredible traumas. Now, we work in the Middle East with kids that have come out of Syria, and you can imagine the stories that but through stories, they're able to relate to others that have been through the same and normalize things. So if there are publishers as well that have content around that they think would be relevant, and it doesn't have to be set in the Middle East or whatever, we're really interested in that, because that's where, again, areas that we're trying to make an impact through the power of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about Beirut, who were designated a city of literature in 2019, and how as a network we can mobilize each other to support them in rebuilding, in the role of stories and books and libraries, and how we can share our expertise, but also a real concerted effort in helping them to rebuild. I know Unesco were involved in rebuilding the Mosul Library as well. And so, yeah, I'm sure there are ways in which we could potentially collaborate around that too.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's what, it's really, it's a global issue. It's a beautiful challenge. And digital makes it actually so much easier to test things out, pilot what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, I'm really glad, we finally connected. And
yes.
I'm also and as proud that it's Nottingham that's doing this.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. That's been a really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it. I mean, Five Leaves would be more than happy to support any work you do in Nottingham, as I'm sure City of Literature will as well. So hopefully we'll hear more from you, and thank you so much. That's been brilliant.
Oh no, thanks to both of you, and I'm not going away. I'll be back in Nottingham